Hey everyone, thanks for listening to EverydayFI, the show that explores the lives and stories of everyday people in the financial independence community. We're back with part 2 of Alan's story, and in today's episode, we discuss why Alan was drawn to the FIRE movement, why finding FI after 40 is different than when you're younger, and the reality of post-FI life. So tune in after a word from our sponsors. This is an awesome revisit to Alan's life. We continue the conversation. So stay tuned. So I'm curious, you said you talked to your kids about money now and that you found the FIRE movement in 2018. Were you talking to your kids about money before that, or is that what kind of made you start talking to them about money? And yeah, can you talk about the journey of like finding FIRE and how that kind of shifted your perspective on personal finance and then how you communicate it with your kids?
Sure. So I guess to start with finding fire. So I worked in tech and I think like I said before, I don't think I ever really was smart. I was good at it, but there were just certain things I never got above like senior manager because there were just certain things I was unwilling to do. I wasn't I was more human centered than results oriented. So I knew that 90% of corporate projects, I would say the little small stuff, most of that stuff dies on the vine. And so I had a pretty good knack for separating, what was really important to work on, what was just some dumb off the cuff thing that they want us to do to keep us busy. And so I was really, really good at getting important things done. And I wasn't so good at following, or I would say committing my teams to dumb busy work. And so I was a little bit, I would say, difficult to work with in those types of projects. It was hard to get to yes. And so I think that kind of hurt me professionally, but it also created a lot of stress because when you work for people who are very sort of results oriented and they don't think twice about asking someone to cancel their vacation and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I had my share of things where I put my wife and kids on a plane and I was supposed to be on that plane, but last minute I had to work and all of that stuff. I gave up a lot of that time with my family and kids at work. And so my first instinct, because I had been an IT manager in various companies, my first instinct was I need to reskill. I need to do something where I don't have this sort of responsibility over people and I don't have to deliver this sort of syrupy HR speech that I don't really believe in. I'd rather just tell them, like it is and stuff. And so my first instinct was to reskill. And so I started to say, well, maybe I'll just become technical again. And I started to learn Angular programming languages and Java and all these kind of things. And I go through all of that and I spend a lot of time on it and I learn it. And I do some really hard things. I'm like, wow, you know, the story I told myself to that point was that I'm a manager because I can't really do those technical things well, but sort of that I could certainly manage it all. I understand it well enough to manage it, but I was actually doing the technical things well. And so reskill was my first intuition. And I don't know how I got onto investing or finance, but I think maybe I was watching CNBC one day or whatever, and this guy came on and he was talking about his favorite stocks and what he was investing in or what he thought would go up or whatever. And I, just to listen to him talk, I was like, I bet that guy couldn't even write. He couldn't write a Java program. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. So I thought, and I not to cast any shadow on that guy. It was just more of a, well, wait. So that means like if I'm smart enough to do this, why am I not smart enough to sort of analyze a company and learn how to invest? Because it was just black box to me up to that point. I was interested in computers and all of that stuff, and I wasn't really interested in what money was doing outside of that. And I actually started listening to a podcast there's a podcast called Invested, and it's Phil Town trying to teach his daughter, Danielle Town, how to invest. And not just how to invest, but how to invest like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And Danielle was an attorney and she knew nothing about investing. So it was starting with the basics. And it was really about how to evaluate a company from a management perspective, whether they have a moat, like some kind of financial moat, and whether they were bringing in cash, just all the things that maybe Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger would do. So I followed that podcast a lot and I started to buy individual stocks and did pretty well with individual stocks, maybe 40 to 60% annual return with individual stocks. It's also, 2018 to present. I mean, you could almost throw a dart and also do pretty well, I think, with stocks. So I don't want to paint the picture that I'm really, really good at that. But what I will say the value of it was, there's two sides of it. One is I didn't have conviction to make really, really big bets. So I had no problem investing $5,000 into a stock, but I'm not going to invest 50. I'm not going to invest, I'll sit in cash. So I may be a very good stock picker, but if I don't have the conviction, I'm not going to get the total portfolio return that I need because I'm only risking a fraction of the money. So I felt a lot better about more the Jack Bogle kind of idea of, throw it in an index fund and, bring a cardiologist along with you when you look at it, 20 years later, and just to make sure you're be okay. So I kind of got to that, but really what brought me into FIRE is because I think on one of those episodes of that Invested podcast, they talked about the FIRE movement and Phil said, oh, I love the FIRE movement. I just hate how they invest, but I love the FIRE movement because he's a value guy. So he wants to go find something for a PE of 6 and buy it, and, whatever. And so I said, well, what's FI movement? So I started Googling that. And I think I started with ChooseFI. And I think it's episode 2021 of ChooseFI that I listened to. And it was really all about, it was sort of a keystone kind of episode, really more about, a lot of the different things you should be doing in the FI lifestyle. Like, I think as Brad Barrett says, it's like living the middle class lifestyle, but just a little bit smarter kind of thing. And so just learning about a lot of that. And I remember listening to it and I got very sad and very depressed because a lot of the people that they would have on that show were in their 20s and early 30s. And I thought, well, we missed the boat because I was sitting there at like 48 or something like that. So I got really, really sad at first. And then they would get on to topics like whether you should buy whole life. We had bought whole life, whether you should get into these products or that products. Well, we had gotten into a lot of these products and that products. And so I even got sort of more depressed because I'm like, not only are we late, but like we've done everything wrong. And so I stuck with it, but we just started to kind of realize a few things. One, we didn't even know our net worth. So at least it started with that because when you're 48, 50 years old, you've worked at a lot of different places, or I did because, usually I would wear off my welcome. And so we had little 401ks all over the place. We never moved them or whatever. So we had no sense of what we were worth or whatever. So if and reading Mr. Money Mustache and all of that stuff, it started to kind of help us so we started to consolidate accounts and get everything into one place. We started to look at the products that we were in, and it was really interesting because I had a product that it was like a variable indexed annuity, whatever. It was something that was quote unquote guaranteed to go up. And so I was watching that product because I knew the date. I knew the date that they were going to make the adjustment on the portfolio, and it was a down market. So I wanted to see if I was winning, right? In other words, the market's down. This product should automatically adjust up at a minimum of 7 or 8% or whatever. And even if the market's down. So I'm like, okay, I should win here, right? I should win because if the market's way up, you're sort of capped in those kind of products too. So if the market's up 20%, you get your 8%, whatever. So I saw, am I going to win? And I watched it and I'm like, what I saw was that, so these products often have like a cash value and then they have a death benefit. So what I saw is that my death benefit guaranteed went up. Okay. That's money when I'm dead. And my cash value went down. The fee for the rider of the death benefit was deducted. So it wasn't growing. And it was, that plus our whole life policy. Again, it like a bit like a house payment. You're making a payment, you're upside down in it. The first payment you make, you might make an $800 payment and your policy's worth $12. And it takes you years and years and years for that to get up to par. So we spent loads of money on that product. And we also had loads of money in this other product that wasn't growing and we'd had for nearly a decade. And I only say that because particularly if there are people that maybe, you can listen to the FI movement and you can see all these people and they're making all the right moves from day one. They throw it in VTSAX and they're just, life is good. You can get into some bad products. You can make some poor decisions and still win. You can still come out on top. And I love this philosophy. You have kids, you get your philosophy from kids shows. So, Frozen 2, the key thing in Frozen 2 is do the next right thing. So even if we've made mistakes with certain products or whatever, what is the next right thing to do? And I think that's a pretty good philosophy in life because I think we always sort of make mistakes. We all can make mistakes, I would say. And so let's do the next right thing. And so we said, well, we can surrender our whole life policy and we can surrender this other indexed annuity IRA product brand, and we'll have to pay these surrender charges. And there's just going to be, I don't know, $10,000 to get out of these products. But, to get them properly into VTSAX or the Fidelity equivalent and to let the market do its thing was completely worth it. We were doing the next right thing, which is we're getting these things in the right products. And we did that a few years back, and now they have more than made up for any surrender charges we've paid. So we kind of got our house in order when it comes to some of the products that weren't serving us. And we had already paid off our house because we had this issue about that from before. Then COVID hit. And COVID helped us a lot because, and I say that, I know that people had a bad time with COVID. I'm sorry for that. I say that in the context of that it cured us of eating out several times a week because we couldn't. It made us make food at home a lot more. It's, that idea we were talking about earlier of how it's really hard to go from spending and opulence and all that to a very fixed income. It takes practice. COVID was that for us. We had to learn to like board games again, and we had to learn how to cook for ourselves. And so when COVID ended and things started to open up again, we were just like, well, why don't we just keep doing this? And so I guess if there's a positive that came out of that, it's that.
Yeah, for sure. It's incredible that you found the FIRE movement in 2018 and then retired like 5 years later. Because I think you said you retired in 2022. So no, 4 years later. And I realized, yeah, up to that point, you had still been saving. And so you still had something. But you not only course corrected, but you course corrected into an early retirement. And I think I see in the notes here that you right now are 52. And so that means you retired at 50. And so that's 15 years earlier than most people, right? So that's incredible. And have you heard of Catching Up to FI, the podcast?
I have, and I was in they had a breakout session at Economy the year that I went to Economy, and I think it's a really good concept, what they're doing. I've listened to a lot of their episodes, and I'm a slow podcast listener. So my first priority is to my kids, and I'm a slab of ham between two pieces of bread right now in terms of this generational sandwich that I'm in. So it's hard for me to listen to a lot. I've been meaning to revisit it because what I hope that someone does an episode on is, particularly, I think it would be very appropriate for the late starter FIRE people, for the Catching Up to FI people, is that a lot of us who are older we come with baggage. I mean, much like I think younger people are come maybe with the burden of student debt and a lot of stuff that maybe my generation did not have to deal with. We got you back. I mean, I've also got 30 working years of terrible money decisions that have compounded and compounded as well. So I do think that there's a market for someone to say, okay, so you bought a whole life policy. Oh, you've bought a timeshare, or you've bought whatever the thing is that you bought. And, how do we put that in the context of your retirement? What are your options? What are things that you can do? So how to do the next right thing, I think would be a fantastic episode for, I would say, sort of common late life money mistakes or whatever. And I know I got a really good friend. I mean, I know there's whole life proponents that are probably listening to this and go, no, you're just not using it right, and self-banking and all of this kind of stuff. And, it wasn't for us. And, I don't want to trash the whole industry, but it just wasn't for us. I mean, we needed more growth. We needed something, particularly that late in life, we needed to take advantage of. To give you perspective, I think in that indexed annuity IRA product that I had, I had put maybe $170,000 in it 8 or 9 years before. And, we've had a really good bull market. And, but when I cashed it out, it was worth about $200,000. So it had made about 30 grand over the course of 9 years in the largest bull market that we've probably had in history. So you kind of have to have the courage. And I'll tell you this, for a very long time, when I was owning those products, I looked for validation and I looked for people to tell me that I was smarter than others for having those. And that's, I think, another sort of risk factor too, is for all of us. When we make a financial decision, I think sometimes we try to really justify it. And, I was certainly doing that. So again, you learn a lot of lessons. And, for us, I think we had to kind of put our ego aside and we had to say, look, we just have to we have to bite the bullet, get in the right products. And, again, when you go from 2018 to 2022 and retiring in 2022, the big secret there is, we had $1 million or more in retirement accounts, in various accounts, and COVID helped us save a lot of money in the whole taxable accounts and stuff like that. Like we had that. The problem was that, we were hemorrhaging money. Like we would spend, 120 a year. So it wasn't enough. As soon as we started to kind of say, oh, well, we don't need Amazon boxes showing up at our house every day, then all of a sudden that money seemed like a lot of money. It doesn't seem like a lot of money if you have that kind of burn of 120 grand or whatever it is. We would spend at our peak, we would have a grocery bill of $1,200 a month, and we would eat out at $1,200 a month. So you would think one of those would give, that if you're eating out a lot, at least your grocery bill would be low because you're not needing to buy. No, somehow we made them both really, really high. And, a lot of takeout was thrown out. I mean, we would bring food home and it would sit in the fridge. And we just made such bad decisions back then. FI saved us because I think we would still sort of be in that mentality that, just keep the party going until it's over. And then somebody will figure out what to do with us, and so that's kind of, 4 years was easy once we reeled in the spending because at least we did a few right things in the savings front.
You mentioned that there's a difference in finding fire after 40. Do you want to speak more to the difference between finding it when you're later in life versus finding it in your 20s and 30s or even in your teens? Some people are finding it in their teens now, which I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was you.
And that's, I think, so when I retired, I started this little Substack blog, and I haven't written for it in a little while. So I like to think of the blog as seasons, and we're just in between seasons right now. But the most popular thing I had ever written on there was finding FI after 40. And, it got picked up by like Physicians on Fire and another site. So it's funny to kind of watch your subscribers go from like your mom and a couple of friends to like it just kind of jumps up and all of a sudden, oh, why did hundreds of people suddenly sign up? For me, there was a lot of revelations. Like I think that there was things that we could realize or do after 40 that maybe would not have been even in our thinking process in our 20s. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to be 28 and know what I know now and invest like that. But the gist of that article was that it's not over just because you happen to be coming up on this late. So you've probably worked a lot. So you probably have all of your Social Security credits. I mean, that's the first thing. I think a lot of people think, well, we're constantly told there's not going to be Social Security. Well, I don't know of a political party that is going to make it very long on the platform of doing away with the primary income source of the largest voting bloc in America. I don't see that happening. Could there be changes to it? Sure, but there's a lot of levers to pull on that. And so I think that people who've been working a long time, if you don't know how, you need to learn and go out and check your ssa.gov, and you can kind of go in there and run various scenarios to see what your payout is going to be. If you take it at 62 or 67 or 70, your Social Security is probably pretty healthy. It's going to be a lot healthier than somebody who worked. They did the 10-year grind and retired at 29. Their Social Security is probably not going to be good as the 45-year-old that's just now picking up on this. The other thing I think is that it becomes a lot easier to not buy things. You go through a lot of garage cleanouts. That starts to become a normal thing. You kind of walk through your house and you're just seeing open Amazon boxes everywhere that you have no place to put them until your recycling bin is only so big. They're just a reminder of how much stuff you're bringing into the house. We've done closet cleanout. So I think your relationship with stuff, in my view, as you kind of get tired of all that. You really do get tired of cleaning all of that stuff up. The other thing too is that if you've worked a lot of places, you may not have a sense of what you're really worth or even whether all that stuff's invested wisely. So you can kind of undergo this journey of tracking down all of your 401ks, getting that stuff all moved into one place and looking too at, particularly for some of your older jobs where you may have something and it might be invested in something that is high fee and, just not a great product. You might be sitting in cash somewhere that you're not even aware of. We took the step of moving. So we first moved everything into Vanguard, and then I struggled a lot with Vanguard's user interface. I really wanted to do a lot more on the web. I love Vanguard. I love their products, but we ended up going to Fidelity because I wanted everything in one place. And Fidelity lets you create a lot of different accounts and all this kind of stuff. So we have cash accounts, investment accounts, all of our stuff's there. So I can go to one screen and we can see our net worth. We can see in one screen, I don't have to go calculate anything else. I can see what have we done in capital gains for the year? What have we done in dividends for the year? I kind of like dividends. I know a lot of our financial people don't like dividends, but I'm kind of a fan of having some of that going on. I think you got to probably have a lot of accounts out there if you kind of pull them together and just really figure out what your net worth is. That's a really good benefit of kind of coming at this older, is that you probably have some assets. You probably do have some things out there that you can kind of pull together.
Yeah, I just want to, there's a resource that I want to give people in case there's so many accounts that you're like, I don't even know where this job was back then. There's the National Registry of Unclaimed Retirement Benefits, and I'm going to link that in the show notes where you can go and find all of your disparate accounts. And so you don't necessarily have to like remember every single job that might have had a 401k. It can do it for you. So I'm going to link that in the show notes. I just wanted to say that. But please continue.
No, that's perfect because I'm pretty sure I'm aware. Yeah, I should probably check that too because I have only consolidated things that I'm aware that I have. But honestly, I have no idea if my first corporate job I had when I was 20 years old, they're still a company, and I have no idea if they had something set up So I think that's a great resource. I think that there are a lot of things kind of going for you when it comes to all of that. And I think that the hardest thing then to really do, or at least for us, is to really be more intentional with your spending. I think when you're older, we're accustomed to a lot of comfort, to be honest with you. I mean, there's only a certain grade hotel I'll stay in. I'm probably over driving the little ratted out college car, stuff like that. There's a certain amount of comfort I think we become accustomed to over time. When I hiked the Camino, I had options. I could have done what a lot of older folks do, which is go with a service and then they'll ship your pack ahead for you and you stay in these hotels and it's all sort of curated for you. And I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it like most younger people do it, which is I wanted to stay in hostels and little albergues and I wanted to haul my own pack. And some of that was sort of this stoic exercise in comfort to say, look, I want to shed some of the comfort that I feel like that I quote unquote have to have. When you go through something like that and you're sleeping in a room of 40 people and it smells and they're all snoring and all of that kind of stuff, I mean, to me, you appreciate better just the simple things of life. I always tell people, like, if you're kind of getting that, you're watching a little bit too much HGTV and you're kind of getting that sort of bug that you want to remodel the house or maybe buy a new house or something like that, go camping. Go camping for a bit and, get in that caveman brain and make your food and sleep in the tent and have it
Poop in a
rain on
bucket.
you. Yeah, and all
Poop
of
in a
that.
bucket.
And then,
That'll make you
yeah,
be like, I don't need a bigger house.
yes,
I have indoor
yes.
plumbing.
When you get home, you're going to be like, this place is an effing palace. Like, this is perfect. This is great. Like, it will cure you really well. And I think it's just a really good exercise in general. It's kind of what I did on, just like get in caveman brain for a while, which is, I got to walk from here. I got to go 15 miles to another village. I got to figure out if I'm going to have a place to stay. Then I got to figure out how to get my one of two pairs of shorts washed. And then I've got to figure out what to eat, where to eat, how to eat, and just all of that kind of stuff. And it's just enough of that caveman brain to me just really resets your perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea. I think my partner actually does that. I mean, that's not the reason he's going camping, but he does go camping and backpacking because he's like, I want to get out of my day-to-day life and really disconnect and get back to nature because it just helps my mental health. And that's just another version of that. And if you can use it also to not, cure yourself of the need to HGTV your home, that's just an added benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a huge camper. I hate camping. I am not a person who likes to use the bathroom outside. So, but we have considered doing like the van life thing, not forever, but
Mm-hmm.
just maybe doing it, maybe getting one and then trying it for a month and seeing how that works. Or like, I think we were thinking of renting one in Iceland and maybe doing that for a week or two and seeing how that fits our lifestyle because it's, camping, but it's glamping, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
glamorous camping, but it still puts you in that mindset of you don't need a lot because you have a very small
Yeah.
space. You're moving around a lot. You're not going to need a lot. And the trouble is now figuring out when we would do that because right now we're on kind of a fertility journey that,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm actually going to make an episode about this, but so we're going to be having kids soon, we hope. And so doing that with kids is probably not the best time, but if it comes to the point where like, oh, this fertility journey is leading us to, maybe we have to adopt kids, maybe that's when we decide, okay, let's try the van life thing before we adopt and then see if we can do it from there. And anyway, so I love that idea. You said something that FI saved you. And I love that because you're coming at it from a place of, in my opinion, the way I'm seeing this is, okay, I made all these mistakes and now I want to do the right thing. And FI was the thing that helps me do this. And it saved us in the fact that like now we're on the right trajectory, or at least right for us, because of course that's different for everybody. And I love that. So yeah, I want to talk about your why of FI. And I know we've talked about how you found it, how you used it to save your financial state and save you and your wife. But when you were listening to that Invested podcast and you heard them talk about the concept of financial independence, retire early, why did that draw you in more than maybe some other types of concepts that they had on that podcast? Why specifically FI and FIRE?
So when I was at Economy and I was in one of the breakout sessions, and it wasn't the breakout session with catching up to FI, but it was another breakout session. They were talking about why of FI. And I had this like Freudian slip of, because people were going around the room and talking about controlling time and energy. And I think that's probably true. But like I blurted out revenge and everybody laughed. And I kind of laughed too. And then I didn't really expand on it there, but I did go back to the hotel and I'm like, why didn't I say revenge? What the heck? And part of it was that I felt like that, look, I've seen my career go from making $8 an hour as a PC coordinator to making $165,000 a year as a mid-level manager in IT, and then a bonus on top of that of another 35 grand or what. So getting up there, pretty nice salary. And, I'm still eating at Chili's, I'm still, maybe my car is a little better, but it's not, I still have to drive it. I still have to, like, I live in a bit of a bigger house, but it's still got some popcorn ceiling up on like my first apartment did. Like, I saw this big change in how much I was earning, and I didn't see my lifestyle changing very much. And I wasn't saving a lot of money and getting super rich either. So money was sort of falling through the cracks. So I'm a big proponent of budgeting. I use YNAB, tracking your expenses, understanding where your money's going. I think it's a huge, I'm not saying you have to budget and just squeeze every penny, but I think you need to really do it long enough to understand where your money's going. I knew that I was working, the job was more stressful. I was making more money than I ever could, and I was still unhappy. And I knew that when I told my company that I was unhappy and I was just thinking about doing something else, they didn't have a happiness solution for me. They didn't say, well, let's explore why you're unhappy. Maybe, and I could have told them, I could have said, look, I deliver, and then I almost feel penalized for delivering, because then you take projects away from people who aren't delivering and you give them to me. And all I want for a little while after spending all of my life force on this project is just a little peace of mind. I just want to move widgets for a while. And then, because to me, work is a series of sprints, it's not a marathon. And I needed to rest. And that what I would do is I would just get a victim of my own success. I would get piles upon piles of new projects, some of them that I felt were quite impossible to deliver. And so I was unhappy. And their solution wasn't to sort of break that apart and say, well, let's, you're an amazing talent. Let's align on the kind of things you like to work on so that you're happy. Because I like to work. I like a good project that's achievable. But they didn't come with that solution. They just came with more money. Well, I had already seen that, extra money doesn't fix a lot of that. And so I just felt like that I was being used up. I was driving, I lived a town over, so I was driving 2 or 3 hours a day. I was having to buy lunch because I was too exhausted to make my little turkey sandwich, and I didn't want my stupid little turkey sandwich anyway. I wanted a good meal because I was stress eating. And I just felt like, I'm like, well, you know, I'm getting used up at work. The money that I make, a lot of it has to go towards supporting me continuing to be getting used up at work. I have to get in a car that can make this commute, and I got to run it into the ground. The illusion no longer worked for me that if I just got this promotion or I just made a little bit more money, everything would be different. I didn't feel very different when I was making 50 grand as when I was making 165 grand. Like I say, I still ate at Chili's, still getting my Mambo combo at Chili's. It didn't seem to make a difference. And so when I was listening to some of those things as the ChooseFI and invested, and it did become apparent to me that the best thing you can buy with your money is your freedom. So I was laid off from one of my jobs and I had no choice but to get another job. I just had to go and do it. And I had to take whatever somebody offered. I didn't have a buffer to where I could be, even though I was bright and good at what I did, I didn't have any leverage. It's this idea, right? Is that when you're with a company and they give you little incentives like golden handcuffs, but it only works one way. Like they can dump you at any time. They can drop you at any moment. And so just a lot of that sort of realization, my sort of why of FI is that it was revenge and just a little bit on a system that was kind of using me up. And I'm just like, I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm just not, I don't care if I'm ready to retire or not. And that's been me trying to figure out purpose and who I was. And, I would have conversations with Miley because she would see it. She was very supportive of me retiring because she could see that I internalized so much. I want to do a good job and everything at work, even if it means, sacrificing my family, my own health and whatever. She was very, very supportive. And I would even have conversations. Are you going to be mad at me if you're on a conference call and I'm in there taking a nap? And she's no, not at all. And then even after being retired for a bit and I'm just fidgety around the house, and she's like, you need to travel. So that's kind of when I went and did sort of the Camino. She's like, you need to travel. She's been great about all of this and super supportive. And so, but it really started out as, look, and it's very childish to say this, I would say maybe a little bit, but it's like, I was really good at pattern recognition. I was really good at leading. My teams loved to work for me, and we were super, super productive because we didn't micromanage. We took on and did things that other teams simply couldn't do. We didn't get bogged down in politics. I was really good at what I did. And a lot of what I accomplished and the accolades got sort of distributed out amongst the team rather than me getting some kind of real bump up for all the sweat and stuff I put in. And so I was just a little bit petty. I was a revenge. It's like, well, I'm extremely good at this, but you can't have me. And I know that sounds kind of silly and stupid, but I think it's just, for me, I just did not like the game. I was good at the game to an extent. There was just certain things I wouldn't do, but I just didn't like the game. I think all of this is just kind of like, oh, how did we evolve into this, And it's just, I wonder, should I really have been owning a lawn care business or doing something that is more tangible and pragmatic? Because I think working in corporate sometimes it's a little bit intangible. You don't know if anything you're doing matters in the end or whatever. And so, for me, I just sort of questioned the whole thing. And again, I did good work. I had good projects, amazing people. I love most all the people I've worked with. I don't blame any of this on them, but I just feel like for me, it just never felt good, and it never felt right to go. Even getting a mortgage for 30 years just hasn't. We paid it off because I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like to have a 30-year mortgage hanging over my head. I know me, and I'm going to snap and move to another company pretty quick. Like I know my own weaknesses and stuff like that. So my why of FI comes from, I think, a very a place of not proactive, I have a sense of purpose and it's greater and whatever. It's really as simple as I've just felt like it's being used up, and I just didn't like that.
I am so with you because whenever I hear people say, like, oh, I'm going after financial independence because I want to free my time up to do the things that I'm passionate about. And that's, it always sounds like more work. I'm like, I'm literally one of those rare financial independence people who really just doesn't want to work. Like, I feel used up too. And I haven't even been in this field for that long, not like you. And it, I could go on a huge rant about corporate America and I won't, but I will say that you are part of a cog in a wheel to make money. And there's very little in that can make you feel like you matter. I mean, even if you work for a company that has an ultimate positive mission, that can help, right? But it still feels like, especially in tech, when your conversations devolve into, what a button says on a page, you're like, what am I doing with my life right now? You know what I mean? And it's just, you're like, this cannot be my life. This can't be my life. So I'm with you. This is why I want to pursue FI. Now, I found the podcast. This is a lot easier for me to say that when I reach financial independence, I would continue doing this because every single aspect of this podcast I enjoy doing, even the parts that are very admin, it's still more enjoyable because I like this and doing this. And it feels like I'm really giving back and I feel like I matter. So we've talked a lot about, how you found FI and what FI meant for you. So now that you have pulled the trigger, what does the other side look like to you? I know you mentioned a little bit that your wife is still doing a consulting business and you've kind of become Mr. Mom, but can you say more about what your life looks like right now and what you'd like to tell other people about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that FI solves some problems. It doesn't solve everything. You still have to take your trash out. You still have to fix leaky sinks and, whatever little day-to-day problems of life they're all still there. So I think for us right now, because we're kind of in this messy middle, right? Our kids are still in school and still figuring out what they want to do. We've talked about also the parent care and what that kind of starts to look like. But I think if we were to insulate ourselves from all of that and say, well, what are Miley and I going to do with all of our time when she finally leaves her consulting job? And it's changed a little bit. I think at one point we thought about being like full-time nomads, getting into the whole go with less culture. And, we had this original concept of what we say is 633, where we would spend 6 months stateside and 3 months in some country and 3 months in another. We do like to travel, and we've been working on learning Spanish now for 3 or 4 years. So we really want to travel. We really want to go other places. I want to live somewhere else just to have that experience as well. So I think we're evolving now to where we might be looking at spending maybe 6 months out of the year in Mexico. We've been working on our residency for Mexico, which is somewhat easy to get. It's $53 in a bank statement to get residency in Mexico. And, to sort of take our Spanish from, I would say, low intermediate to full on, fluent, I think we just need some time in the country to do that. I think we also like that it's close enough to the US that, if we need to kind of come back and help a parent with something or help our kids with something, that we could do that. But we want to just really experience other cultures and other food and all of that. We've spent a little bit of time in Spain and Europe. We really like that. I think we'd like to do the whole Southeast Asia thing as well. So travel will be, at least in our early years of retirement, will be a big part of things, and really a necessary part as well, because I think that, from an investing perspective, we're not fat fi, we're not lean fi either. We're probably just, old traditional mustachian hippies, like traditional 4%ers, right? But I think we would feel better if we had a mechanism set up to where we could spend some time intentionally in some low cost countries. And so that's kind of what we've been sort of working towards. Just, Florida, from our perspective, the cost of living in Florida has gotten so high that it used to be cheap. It used to be really cheap here, but now it's again, just back to the thing of travel and, a little bit of that geo arbitrage. I think that's what it's going to be for us. And then, wherever our kids land, wherever they settle, we like the idea that we will be agile enough to sort of go where they are and, be where they are. We don't want to create any kind of sense of obligation on our kids that, okay, well, you will spend Christmas here every year and you will spend, you know, they're going to live their own lives and we're going to adjust our lives to kind of help, and kind of be with them where they are. And also live our own lives. I mean, we don't want, I think I said this earlier, but we don't want to be walking around an empty house, wringing our hands and hoping that our children call and hoping that maybe they'll come by and visit. And, I still struggle with this now. Like I look at when I wake up in the morning and I go and I grab a cup of coffee and I look at the couch and I look at my spot on the couch and I'm like, that's the enemy. That's the enemy. The couch and the television is the enemy. So we're trying to design an interesting life post FI. And a lot of that involves, people really don't believe it when we say it. I think when we tell our FI friends, this all makes complete sense. I mean, our FI friends, it's completely normal to say, yeah, I don't want to own anything. I just want to rent Airbnbs in Mexico for as long as that makes sense. And then, we'll figure out, like, that makes complete sense to the FI community. They don't even think that's strange. But if you say that to family and friends, I mean, it's hard to have that conversation because then you go, oh, well, no, you see, it makes sense because of this and our sequence of return. But they haven't done the work. They haven't been on the FI journey like we have. So FI conversations almost never go well with people who aren't into FI. I think at Economy, there was the one presenter, she wrote the tipped book, and I don't remember her name, but she worked in sort of the service industry. And one of the things on her slide was that people who aren't into feet don't like to talk about feet. And it was just sort of, it rang true to me because I was like, you're so right. Like, I cannot go to a party and say, oh, well, retired early and here's all the principles of FI. Like, that just never, ever goes well. But we're trying, it's going to be shocking, I think, to a lot of our regular friends when we sell our home and they go, well, wait, where are you moving? We go, well, that suitcase and these two backpacks for now. And we're going to bum around Mexico and maybe bum around Southeast Asia. And we're going to come back and we'll rent an Airbnb here. And we'll, that's kind of how we're designing it. And I just don't know if people are ready for that in our close circle. I think it's kind of funny. So,
Yeah, I get that. And again, there's so much there. So first, I want to go back to how you said that you want to be kind of more transient as a parent so that you can be a part of your kids' lives versus them trying to be a part of yours. And I really like that because I feel like the opposite is true for our generation. And I'm lucky that my mom is kind of like that, where she's like, I'm going to come to you for Thanksgiving and things like that. And I think when we have kids, she'll probably do the same thing where we either, you know, don't go to her place, but maybe go travel somewhere together and we're all making the same journey, or she's coming to us, depending on how it is. I love that. And I think that shows your kids, we want to be a part of your lives and you don't just have to show us that you want to be a part of ours. Like, we're going to make it possible. And I mean, I haven't seen my dad since 2019 because it's very hard for me to travel all the way to Texas from where I am, also where he lives. Like, his house is not conducive to guests. So I would have to get like a hotel and stuff. So it's not conducive to visiting. And then he kind of discourages us from visiting, but then he also doesn't visit us. And so he hasn't met my partner yet. We've been together for 4 years. He's never met him. And then what you said about the FI community understanding this versus people in our lives not understanding this. I was just thinking about this today, about how almost everybody in my life who's either a friend or a family member doesn't even know that I have a podcast. And when I mention it, I get very nervous when they ask me what it's about, because I'm like, how do I explain this to them? And I usually just say, oh, it's a personal finance podcast. And that's it. I just leave it at that. And because I don't want to have to explain to them the concept of financial independence. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And
that's a superpower, by the way, because when I first started sort of writing after FI, sort of writing articles and FI like material, right? And I was very worried because I went the other direction. Like I said, oh, I wrote this and I posted it to like all my families and friends on Facebook and said, hey, please read this. And I wish in retrospect that I had not done that and just let the FI community find me themselves, because it impacts my writing. Like, because now I know, oh man, my biggest fan is my English teacher from 7th grade. And now the next article I'm writing to my English teacher in 7th grade. Like, it starts messing up the message because I know that a lot of my audience is not part of this community. And I feel like now I need to start doing some remedial writing and as opposed to getting to the meat of something that I really want to write about. Or, I have some friends that might have a different opinion about, should we be using the ACA with subsidized health care on the back of the taxpayer, or whatever. And I have 5 people that are like, oh, that totally makes sense. And from a numbers perspective, I always say, well, look, I've done the math and, I've worked most of my life. I've paid about $1 million in taxes up to this point. I feel like it's probably okay for me to get this little healthcare subsidy until I get on Medicare or whatever. I've done the work. I've paid taxes. I feel okay about it. And that's the way where I usually leave it. But it does mess with your message a little bit if you somehow become aware that your Nana is reading all of your stuff and whatever. You're like, okay, I guess I won't use F-bombs in this post.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes I get a little nervous because I do talk about my parents on here. And I'm like, oh God, are they going to listen to it? My dad has no idea that I have this podcast because we just don't talk about money. So he just doesn't know. My mom does, but I'm not sure how much she's listened to. So so I'm not too worried about it. And yeah, you're right. I felt lucky because I had a community I could plug into immediately with this. And that just felt so much easier as a content creator to do that and to have a community that you could serve specifically. So. All right. So we're coming to the end of our time. And, I'm going to be splitting this into 2 episodes. And so when it posts, people are going to know that. And we've talked for almost 3 hours now. And this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. And I feel like we haven't even talked about everything that we want to talk about. But now that we're coming to the end, I want you to leave us with either a life hack recommendation or learning, and then tell us where we can find you too.
Sure. So life hacks, I know a lot of people in our community have similar dreams about, oh, well, I really just want to take off and live in the south of Spain or, or something like that. And I know there's a lot of people that I've met that they're really trying to learn Spanish, for example, crack Spanish as an example. And, the way we all learned Spanish in school is not the way to learn Spanish. It took us a little while, but I would recommend that if you want to learn things like little apps, little gamified apps are really not the way to go. We've had the most success ourselves with this method called comprehensible input. And comprehensible input is really about storytelling in simple Spanish without subtitles, without translations, where you are talking with someone in very simple terms where they can see what you're talking about, maybe simple drawings or whatever. It's this idea of getting input in the context of some sort of story. Your brain works much, much better. It's way, way more important when you're learning a language to understand the language than to speak the language. It's way more important to understand what someone's saying to you. And you can sort of grunt out simple yeses and nos than it is to be able to speak and not understand at all what they're saying to you. So we use resources like LingQ, it's LingQ.com. And we also use dreamingspanish.com, two of those resources that are really focused on just comprehensible inputs. Start with like little simple beginner, super beginner videos where they're telling you a little simple story in Spanish, and you don't have to do flashcards, you don't have to do anything. You're just watching little simple stories. So our Spanish has been, we've gotten to, I would say, intermediate, and it has taken some time, but like when we do go to Mexico or wherever we happen to go, I think it makes such a difference when you can interact with the locals in their own language. A lot of times they'll switch on you to English because their English is better than your Spanish, but it really is a great feeling and a great sense of connection when you can walk through a market in San Miguel de Allende and you can, you know, we went on a trip to kind of help someone make change. They couldn't make change at one vendor, and we were in Spanish helping them back and forth. And it was just of those little moments beyond going into cathedrals or seeing these great vistas or doing all the touristy stuff. To me, the best time that I have when we travel is when, I'm able to have just a little quiet moment with someone who lives there and knows nothing about the world in their own language. It's such a dopamine hit. So I would say if you're into language learning and you're stuck and you don't feel like that, the Duolingos or whatever are really working out for you, give those other resources a try, be patient with them, listen to, hundreds and hundreds of hours of Spanish, and it will just come to you. As far as how people can reach me, so I go to CampFI's. In fact, you and I have something in common, I think, because I think that you and I were at CampFI Mid-Atlantic together. And I think that we were maybe, I don't know if this is true, but see if this rings a bell. Two of us got up on stage and went through all of our stuff at CampFI, like our plan. You and I think were the first people to do that. Now they do that at every CampFI where someone sort of gets up there and gets naked or whatever. But I think you and I were the first two people to do that at CampFI, at the very same CampFI.
Cool. Yeah, I do remember you then. I thought you seemed familiar, like you sounded familiar. You seemed familiar.
We were there. And so I usually go to the Florida CampFI, usually the March one. I'm really excited this year because there's a road trip that a lot of people do to go from the March CampFI in Florida up to Econome. So I'm excited. I'm finally kind of in on this road trip. I'll be riding it with Keith. You talked to Keith earlier. And so I'll be at Econome. I have a little Substack that sometimes I write on called Finally Time to Live. It's finally time to live.substack.com. And it's not a money making thing. It's just, when I feel like there's something I need to get off my chest, I'll write something out there. So a lot of the nonsense I've spread here is also there in writing. So you can look at that and hold me to it. And yeah, just hit me up at any of the FI groups on Facebook. I'm in most of the FI groups on Facebook as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you for being here, Alan. This has been an amazing conversation. I can't wait to see how it translates into 2 episodes. I really had a great time chatting with you, and I can't wait to see you at another CampFI.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a delight.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, everyday-fi.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, If you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.